All right. Well, good morning, Vineyard, Milwaukee. I am really excited to have three friends join us today. This has been some kind of week we've had. I'm sure you are full of all kinds of emotions and thoughts as we're processing the events that have taken place this week. And I just really wanted to spend some time. I thought it would be more interesting to hear other voices than just mine as we respond to the events that took place this week. And so I have three friends here, and I'm just going to give them a chance to introduce themselves to you. We've had a couple of the members of this panel as guests with us before, and of course, you know, our one and only Hannah is joining us as well. But I'll just give them a minute in case you are new to our church or just visiting and checking this out. I'll give them a chance just to introduce themselves. So whoever would like to go first.
Okay, I'll go. I'm Hannah. I live in Milwaukee and I'm a public school teacher here.
So I'm Lydia. I am originally from Milwaukee, Wisconsin, but I've spent the last 3 years in California, moving to Kentucky next weekend. I'm married and have a little toddler, and by profession, I'm a licensed professional counselor, spiritual director, and I'm training to be a doula.
Oh, wow. Well, my name is Jay English, and I'm the founder and CEO of Plain English Incorporated, which is a nonprofit. We provide consultation services as well as trainings to address issues of race and culture, specifically in regards to multiculturalism in churches, businesses, and nonprofits. So glad to be here. You know, unfortunately, I'm not training to be a doula, so I can't beat that one.
No, that's pretty awesome. So yeah, for sure, we have just some incredible humans on with us today, and so I just really am looking forward to just spending some time together this morning as we process together the events that just took place this week. And so I just kind of wanted to start off with just giving any one of you who would like to share kind of your initial feelings, thoughts when, you know, a lot of people talk about, we'll always remember where we were, you know, when 9/11 happened, or, you know, if you're older like me, when the space shuttle blew up, you know, different huge sort of monumental events in our history. And I think that what happened on January 6th will be one of those events for all of us. And so I guess my question is kind of, where were you and what were you doing when you saw footage of what was going on, and kind of what were your initial responses as you watched it unfold throughout the day and began to process it? Kind of how were you feeling? What were your first thoughts as you watched that happening?
I was angry. Part of me was angry at what was happening. You know, and I understand the right to protest is something we all have. I'm completely for that. I think that's what makes our country amazing. But to see what that turned into, I was thoroughly disappointed. And then I got angry because I didn't see the level of security or response or police presence or National Guard or any of a number of things. I mean, if I'm being really honest, I was on Twitter last night and I'm coming across videos that are showing law enforcement opening barricades. That's scary. Mm-hmm. And I talked to a friend of mine and I said, you know what doesn't happen in my community? That they show up ready for us and we can peacefully protest for 100 days. So it's amazing. I saw in my eyes a very complete and total double standard in how people like me are viewed. We're viewed as a threat. We're viewed as a problem. You better be prepared if they show up in numbers. You better have the riot gear on, the tear gas in hand, and be prepared with 7-foot fences. And I saw several thousand white people show up, and everybody knew they were coming to be rowdy. I mean, this was not a shock. It was all over social media. It was being marketed everywhere. Everybody knew January 6th was the date, and they were coming to the Capitol. We all knew this. So even knowing that, they didn't expect them to do that. So, you know, that's where I got angry, because all I could think of was if those people had have been Middle Easterners, God forbid somebody has a turban on, and they ran up those stairs and into that building, I guarantee you the response would have been very different. Mm-hmm. If me and a bunch of my friends, if me and these two ladies right here, right now, tried to run into the nearest Walmart like that, we'd be face down on the pavement, cuffed, zip tied, and thrown in the back of cars. Guarantee you. Guarantee you. So there's a level of, now many of them are getting arrested now, and this was another part. So I got mad at this too. The ability to do what they did and go home and get arrested peacefully tomorrow. Mm-hmm. Where does that happen at? Not here, not in my community. That's not how that looks. We don't get to turn ourselves in peacefully the next day because they came and knocked on the door and said, hey, we have a picture of you. Mm-hmm. So it's, to me, everything that we've been saying, and it's, I already know we live in two different worlds. That's upsetting. But to then have people act as if that's not true. Mm. Look at that and tell me. Mm-hmm. And if you do, I don't have anything else to really say. Because if you still believe that the world is equal, that it's all the same, there is no difference. Look at the Black Lives Matter protest in Washington, D.C., and look at the police presence that was there. And that was a peaceful protest. Mm-hmm.
I think that's when I got mad too. Oh, I'm sorry, Hannah. Did you want to go?
You go ahead.
I don't think there was a surprise that something was going to happen. Like, I, in fact, told my husband the night before, it'll be interesting to see if they actually confirm Biden, because I was like, something's going to happen to try to prevent that from happening. So I was actually on my way to Milwaukee on a plane. So I missed all of it. When I came off the plane, most of it had finished. And my mom was like, did you hear what happened? And when she told me, I was just kind of like, oh, okay, yeah, like that's expected. And then obviously, as you're watching the videos, which I didn't, I just can't do the news right now because it just stirs me up so much that I can't calm down. So I didn't watch the news, but obviously later, as I look through Facebook and social media, you can see clips of it. And you're like, okay, again, I wasn't surprised by the lack of presence or the fact that it wasn't the same as how we would be treated if we were protesting. But I did get mad when it was like people were still saying, yeah, but like they still had the evidence right in front of them and they still didn't say, yeah, this is wrong. It shouldn't be happening. It was like the same people who have been saying it's wrong this whole time were speaking up. But the people who have been making excuses were still making excuses. And the people who are still being silent were still being silent. And then what made me even more upset were like the white Christians that like have been Trump supporters and have been praying for something to happen. Like there was no like, this is wrong and it shouldn't have happened. It was just kind of like silence, nothing from them either. And so it's like all this evidence is presented in front of you of why this isn't good and why this is unfair and why we're so angry. And you still don't understand. You still don't empathize. You still don't get it. So that's when I became angry. I think at the lack of response from people that I was hoping or still hoping would have a response, but haven't.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was in the middle of the school day, so I had just gotten off of a video call with a teacher that I had a meeting with, and I got just a news notification about the fact that the Capitol was being stormed. And I, even though, like in retrospect, I had been wondering if in the days leading up to January 20th or 21st, if something would happen, I was shocked and I like stopped everything and really couldn't believe the images that I was seeing. And my first reaction after shock was fear, just with not like that. Really, I'd never seen anything like that happen in a building in Washington D.C., of a place of such high security that you think is untouchable. for that to just have been so easily toppled, and the photos of people inside the Capitol, it's just unbelievable to me. And I also have been avoiding the news in general, and even Facebook. I don't dig too deep into what's going on there because it is upsetting and like ruins relationships sometimes for me, or like it's hard to get over some things that people post. So I've been avoiding that, but I've been just in the past couple of days worried about the fallout and knowing how things have gone in the past with issues that are just as horrible, or like not too, or just as aggravating, but not at the scale in terms of national security being broken. Knowing how those have transpired in the past with white perpetrators, just worried about how justice may or may not be delivered in the days to come.
Yeah. I mean, you guys kind of touched on this already. I have a friend who's a fellow Vineyard pastor in our movement, who is Black, who made a post alluding to something I think, Jay, you mentioned, this idea of, we seem to live in two different Americas. And kind of very similar response, just the lack of consequence was unfathomable. You didn't see people getting arrested. I remember even watching a scene where the police were just physically, just with their hands, kind of just shoving people back. I mean, like you would as a school teacher, if you had a mob of third graders coming at you, you'd be like, sit down, sit down. I mean, it was just so unbelievable. I guess that's kind of my follow-up question. You talked about this particular event and the evidence that supports this idea of two very different kinds of experiences of living in America. Can you expound on that at all, about how it feels like there's two different Americas, that our experience is very different? This was just another example. Do you have anything you want to kind of add to that, other ways that it feels like two different Americas, two different experiences?
Well, Hannah mentioned the fair, and I think that's like a huge element of this whole situation, right? Like they were able to freely do that, and then they were praised for it by our highest. I mean, they were praised for it by our president. So, obviously, that speaks volumes to how our country is, as far as identifying what's right and wrong, and the concern for people of color. Like, obviously, we don't matter. We are seen as less than. That's kind of why BLM exists, Black Lives Matter, because we are reminded daily, and Wednesday was just another example that our lives don't matter. And so that brings about fear and concern, because of people like that on TV. I mean, I guess that's extreme, but that happens on a daily basis. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. Me and my husband experience things like that on a daily basis, where people treat us less than in some shape or form. And so you always have to consider, when you're going places, how are you going to be viewed by others? And so even with this move to Louisville, Kentucky, when my husband found out about the job, the first thing was well, do they know that you're Black? Because would they still give you this position if they knew you were Black? And he was like, I don't know. So I was like, well, do we tell them now, or do we tell them when you show up and then have to deal with the consequences of that? Even the idea of my husband, he's currently packing up a truck and he's going to travel cross country. That's terrifying to me. I don't want him to, because I don't know if a single, one Black man should be driving across country. Because what if, there are people out there that see him and run him off the road, or, try to hurt him. He's by himself. And so there's a lot of fear in that. Kentucky's a southern state. They went red. I don't know if our neighbors are going to be racist, or are they going to be welcoming? Do they want us there, or do they not? And so there are things that, like, as a Black person, you have to think about and consider that white people don't ever think and consider. And I think, like, that's frustrating when you try to explain that experience to people and they're just like, yeah, well, like, we had it hard too. Not everything was handed to us. But it's like, yeah, but you have to understand that just because your skin is a lighter shade, you will have opportunities and experiences, and you won't have the same struggles that we will have, right? And so that's frustrating to continually have these conversations privately at home with your family about that, and, like, plan for what you're going to do or how you're going to handle that situation, and then, have to go out into the world and pretend like that doesn't matter, or like that we're not being judged because of our skin color. So
and something you said, Lydia, how you'll have these conversations with white people and they'll say, well, I've had it hard in these kinds of ways, but it wasn't because of my skin color that I had it hard. Like, certainly as a human being, we all have different kinds of hardships and suffering. But as a white person, it wasn't a result of my skin color that I had a particular kind of hardship. And that's the distinct difference that I think is often misunderstood.
Yeah, I actually, so when I gave birth to my daughter, I had a very traumatic experience. It was awful. And part of the problem was that I was never heard. Like, nobody ever heard my concerns. So for 10 days, they kept telling me that my pain wasn't that big of a deal and that it was just part of having a C-section. I'd be fine. And just did not listen to my husband and I in regards to, like, treatment options or anything until I finally got too sick that they were like, oh, well, maybe we should do something. But anyways, when I came out of there, the question was asked, was I treated that way because of the color of my skin, or was I treated that way because it was poor health care? And I remember sharing that with a group of women who weren't Christians, and they were very empathetic and was like, I'm so sorry that happened to you. And it was like, it probably was race related. And then I remember sharing it with people at my church, and one of the ladies being like, yeah, that could have happened to anyone, so, like, it's not that big of a deal. You should just, we all have to deal with poor healthcare. So yeah, that's very true. A lot of people miss that part. That we always have to consider, is this because of our color of our skin that we're being treated the way that we are?
I think for me, looking at what happened, on Wednesday, it's people don't think of the long-term trauma of the videos we've been seeing of what's been happening to Black bodies for a number of years. It was hard for me to see the freedom that I saw yesterday, and now all these people are playing through my minds. I'm seeing Tamir Rice, who was shot within 1 second of the police car pulling up. We watched George Floyd die over a $20 bill. You know what I'm saying? Like, Ahmaud Arbery was literally jogging. They were not storming the Capitol to interrupt a peaceful transfer of power. We can just go down the list of things that we've seen, things that I've seen, things that people have engaged in and endured. So to see that, and then to see what happened in DC, where I'm like, man, I'm not mad at the protesters. I mean, at the end of the day, you protest, and if you decide to loot and riot, I disagree with you, but there's consequences for that typically. But to see the stark difference in just how it was being viewed, how it was being handled, it absolutely is two different worlds. There's things I don't get to do. I've worked in corporate, and I learned very quickly there's a certain way I can't be here, because when I do that, it's perceived as, example, I love to laugh. I love to have a good time. Well, I'm perceived as being lazy and goofing around when the white guy next to me, who's actually louder and goofier, is being promoted because he's friendly. He gets along with people and works with others well. And I'm like, well, time out. Wait a minute. I'm joking with him, but I'm in the office getting written up. I remember going to the mall, and people go to the mall, and typically they stand around and talk and look through windows for stuff that they know they don't need to buy. Well, I was standing outside of a window, minding my own business, waiting on a ride to pick me up. And I had a guy come tell me I was loitering outside of his store, and he was calling the police on me. Like, it's crazy. I can do normal things. there's a quote, and I forgot who the lady was, but basically, being black is to understand that at any point in time, something bad can happen to me under no volition of my own. I've been at the lakefront and been asked to leave because I fit the description of a suspect in the area. Like, I'm doing nothing. I'm literally standing here. And of course, when they say, you know, we've got word of a suspicious person, the suspicious person tends to typically look like me. So the world is very different. And it's navigating that, and it's constantly repeated to you through images, through visuals, all of the things that have been being said this entire summer. Colin Kaepernick called a SOB because he kneeled. And that's disrespectful to the national anthem. But people were out there with the flags on the ground. They're carrying it and dropping it on, you know, the guy was in Nancy Pelosi's office with the flag draped over the side of, that's not disrespectful to the flag. People are in the Capitol with the Confederate flag. But Colin Kaepernick was an SOB, and these people, I love you and you're special. You know, I'm listening to the words. I'm hearing what's being said. We're not talked about like that. You know, what happened yesterday, if we look up the definition of domestic terrorism, just being honest, it falls under that grounds. But yet and still, we want to make Black Lives Matter into a terrorist organization. I'm not saying which one is right or wrong. I'm just saying that the words, when the looting starts, the shooting starts.
Yeah.
I didn't look. I'm just saying these are the things that were being said all summer long. I do my business as far as working with multicultural situations. I've had pastors tell me, I'm not willing to talk to you about multicultural anything until you all stop looting and rioting. You all, I don't have that type of power, first of all. Secondly, like, okay, well, what about this? Well, people who are very vocal all summer were very quiet the last couple of days. And if I'm honest, we see that. We remember. I remember what you said to me. I remember the post you put up. I remember the things you were saying. I remember you calling me out. I remember. And now, well, people are calling them patriots. They're fighting for the country. Well, you know, I had a guy. So the lady who was shot for trying to come through into the chamber through the door. Hey, she was unarmed, and the death penalty shouldn't have been used on her. And I'm just, we've been crying that out for hundreds of years. And all we get told is, if you comply, you wouldn't die. I didn't see a lot of compliance yesterday. I'm just saying. What I saw was, again, tremendous restraint. I saw a value being placed on the bodies that were running into the Capitol that we don't have placed on ours. Doing the same stuff, both of them being wrong. Because it's all wrong. I don't justify any of it. It's all wrong, but the value I saw placed, police are getting shoved, they're getting pushed, they're getting knocked down. They're spraying the police with pepper spray. And the police, to your point, they did an amazing job. They really did. I want those officers throughout the country. I need them showing up to mental health episodes, because we got a lot of young African Americans being killed for having mental health episodes where there's 5 police officers on site and 1 person. But they feared for their lives.
You know, I think you hit the nail on the head, Jay, when you said it's not an issue of whether the behavior is right or wrong. It's the value placed on the bodies. That was the distinct difference. And that right there, I mean, that's the 2 different worlds that you're talking about.
Yes.
It was the value placed. Yep.
That's right. That's why we're screaming out when we're saying Black Lives Matter and people take that personal. At the end of the day, what we're saying is we don't feel that we matter as much as some others.
Right.
And that was an example for us looking at it. There's a much higher value placed on certain individuals for them to be able to do that.
Right.
And my conversation was, hey, here, unfortunately, only white people get to do that type of stuff.
That's right.
Live through it, go home, and get arrested tomorrow. If they're arrested.
Right. Right. Yeah, I was going to kind of jump off something you guys just said, but before I do that, Hannah, did you want to add anything to what's been said so far?
I just wanted to agree. I do think that we've already emphasized it, but the difference between the two Americas that we could see is in the value that's placed on bodies, as well as not just in a day-to-day experience, but also in the systemic issues that are at play in our country. I see that mostly in my day-to-day in the public school system, just the vast difference in value that's placed on brown and black students' education as compared to what's offered in the suburbs and in other better off districts. There's a lot at play in systems, but that's just, I think that's really a very, the definition of seeing the value, like the difference of value in black and white lives really is present in those issues as well, and is another way that it's enforced that the message is sent to a black and brown person that their life is not worth as much.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm glad you brought that point up, because I think, we were talking about the event that just happened, which was just this like massive, like you were saying earlier, Linda, like the evidence, like right in front of your face, like such a severe contradiction. But there's so much below the waterline, as you're talking about, Hannah, that's just like in every system within America, in a formation of America. And it plays out in all the ways, in education and healthcare and in all, neighborhoods. I mean, we just go on and on and on. And even, unfortunately, even in our churches. And I think that's what I wanted to, kind of end our time with, is, I think that's, all of us here are followers of Jesus. And, Lydia, you talked about, coming off of your trauma with your experience after your delivery, and felt more empathy from your friends outside the church than in the church, which is so unfortunate. And, I feel like there's been more and more, I've seen more and more pastors and leaders kind of coming out over the last few years, coming against some of the policies and the ideology represented by this administration, around issues of justice and immigration, all kinds of things. But it's still been kind of in this vague space. I have felt like lots of different messages, and there's been such this desire for unity. And so seems to be like a focus on bringing the left and the right together and all of that. And I feel like after this happened, I feel like it just, something just broke open, and I'm seeing a level of leaders and pastors, like more prominent leaders and pastors that have big voices in the Christian community, coming out with a little more bold, clear, direct statements. In fact, I just read an article, I don't know if you guys have saw, in Christianity Today. I think it might have come out today, where the author, it's titled, "We Worship the Magi, Not the MAGA." And he wrote, "So for me, the worst part of yesterday's insurrection is how it represents an utter failure in the American church. This anti-epiphany reveals the horrid outgrowths of Christian nationalism, faulty spiritual formation, false teaching, political ideology, and overriding ignorance. Though it saddens me deeply, it must be clearly admitted yesterday's atrocity was in large part brought to us by the white evangelical church in America." And then another pastor, one of my personal kind of heroes in the faith, he's a South African Vineyard pastor named Alexander Venter, who's authored a bunch of books on healing and church and spirituality. And he was actually very prominent pastoring during our apartheid, and actually helped fight against that when he was in South Africa, which he's still in South Africa, but he's been following, like the rest of the world, what's been happening. He said a lot of things, but I just wanted to read one part of a reaction he had. He said, biblically speaking, we get the leaders we deserve. God raises up and or allows leaders in power often to unmask and mirror the face of the nation, revealing the character of their supporters, in this case, the majority of white U.S. evangelical Christians. Trump has not so much damaged the witness and credibility of the church through the wholesale support of fundamentalist evangelicals, with their leaders and court prophets continually, uncritically blessing Trump. Rather, God has used him to reveal their theological and moral bankruptcy in their idolatry of American Christian nationalism. Judgment begins at the house of God. And then he quotes 1 Peter 4:17. And so, as I'm kind of reflecting on all of this and the way sort of Christian nationalism, which is sort of where we have this kind of mingling of our allegiance to Jesus and the kingdom of God in with our allegiance to America, or making American idol. And I think intermingled with that is this white supremacy that is part of America. And so it gets all intermixed, which I think is kind of at the root of what's been happening. And I guess I wonder what your thoughts are, because I've been kind of processing this myself. Has the church in America been too passive in our responses all along in these last 4 years in this political environment we've been in? Are we speaking out too late? Have we come across to, have we not, it is sort of in our desire to remain unified as a body with people on different sides of the aisle, like historically, Democrats, Republicans coming together. But with this being a very unique political situation that's revealed this, kind of put a mirror up to the reality of this mixing of Christianity and nationalism. Have we not confronted this more directly soon enough?
No, we took too long.
Mm.
So I appreciate the article that came out.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like, okay, you're going to wait until the fire burns the house down to tell me it's a fire over here.
Mm.
No, I need you to say something when you see smoke.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard for me to give credit. I struggled yesterday. So, I'm probably the opposite of the other couple of ladies. Like, I'm all into the news. I'm all into the politics of all of this. I'm watching the proceedings. And it's amazing to me that, people are giving credit to even some of the senators or some of the congressmen that initially were going to object. But now that this happened, I withdraw my objection. Well, you don't get any credit for that. You're just trying to be on the right side of history in my mind, based on what's happened.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it would be really hard for you to stand up and to still support him today. I wouldn't expect you to do that. Mm-hmm. My issue as a minority is I need you to stand up and say something. Where have you been the last 4 years? When we've been crying out and screaming and yelling and telling you there's a problem and you've been ignoring us. Mm-hmm. You haven't been willing to say anything because you've been afraid of losing congregants. You haven't been willing to take a stand on any of these major issues. When George Floyd is kneeled on for 9 minutes and dies, and there's silence throughout the Christian world. But now, finally, so for me, it's like, so if this is what it takes to denounce, I'm scared to death of us. And if this is how the church responds,
Mhm.
when people have been hurting, people have been telling you there's problems, there's been saying there's issues, and we've refused to take up arms with our brothers and sisters literally in Christ
Mhm.
and stand by them and at least say, I'm cool with the people that absolutely voted for President Trump, but at least can acknowledge the man lies.
Mhm. Mhm.
Say, look, the man is crazy, he's racist, he says all type of off the wall stuff, but his policies are working for my family. I can respect you.
Mhm.
Hey, you know what? The stuff he's doing and saying, it's, yeah, I wish he wouldn't say that, but you know what? My business is doing really well under his policies. That's why I voted for him. I can get that. When I hear people telling me he's God's man for this time,
Mhm.
what lies? When has he ever lied? Give me an example of his racism. He's never been racist. And this is coming from the pulpit.
Mhm.
These are coming from churches. When we as minorities, again, when the Bible says that we're supposed to love our neighbors as ourselves, and we as minorities are telling you the phrase "make America great again" is problematic.
Mhm.
Well, what do you mean? We're trying to get it back. I'm trying to tell you that for us, this is the best it's been,
Mhm.
and we're still screaming.
Mhm.
So when you say, let's make it great again, what are we going back to?
Mhm. Mhm.
We going back to segregation? We going back to the civil rights movement? Are we going back to sharecropping? Are we going back to Jim Crow?
Mhm.
Are we going back to lynchings? Are we going back to the GI Bill not mattering for us? Are we going back to redlining is actually still happening. So no, are we? What are we going back to?
Mhm.
So when we're saying these things and we're explaining them as eloquently as we can for those of us that are able, and we've been ignored.
Mhm.
Many of us have been saying this is going to be a problem. The man is giving us every sign, and we've still seen churches sign up for it.
Mhm.
Still seen places. I know pastors that have been, hey, look, if you don't vote Republican, you're going to hell. You cannot be a Christian and vote Democratic. That's being said by Christians.
Yeah.
So for me, I appreciate the article,
Mhm.
but you gonna wait till they literally storm the Capitol before you
Right.
put it out. No,
Right.
you get, in my mind, you get zero credit. We all saw that
Mm.
happening. At this
Mhm.
point, how can you not say something?
Right. Right. Mhm.
So yeah,
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I don't give them any. I appreciate them.
Yeah.
No, we needed that 2 years ago.
Right. Yeah.
In my opinion, I think the church has not just been too late in the last 4 years. I think it's been too late from way, way before. I mean,
Since Jesus left.
yeah, I mean, the church has been complicit with inequality in this country since before its foundation. There's it's a history of the gospel and Christianity being used to defend slavery, to defend, separate but equal. And as the foundation of this country, it was supposed to be a Christian nation. So already, I think from the initiation of this country, there's been a confusion between nationalism and following Jesus. And so I think, yeah, it would have been great for the church to speak out at the start of the Trump presidency or before the Trump presidency even began, while the campaign was happening in 2015, 2016, or whatever, 2014, all those years. But yeah, I just think the church is hundreds of years late, personally.
Mhm.
So.
Yeah. Thanks for making that point. That's an important one. Mhm.
I don't know if I have too much more to add to that.
Yeah.
The Color of Compromise speaks to that, just how American Christianity was founded in white supremacy,
Mhm.
racism,
Mhm.
and slavery. And so
Mm.
that's what we're founded on. And I remember years ago, one of my mentors said, the thing that will destroy our nation is that we've never, as a Christian community, repented of racism. We've never dealt with
Mhm.
slavery. We've never addressed these issues. And so here we are where there's a blatant example of it. And you said that there are pastors that are coming out and speaking out against it, but my own personal pastor is still silent, hasn't said anything. Um, yeah, it's too late. I think we're dealing with the consequences of it now, and I think the reality is that we're going to be judged, and we're about to see what that looks like. It's too late. So at the very beginning of this, God really spoke to me because I was really frustrated with everything that was happening, and He took me to the passage. Now I'm going to butcher it because now I can't even think of who it is. Zechariah, I think he had a writer that wrote for him. I forget his name. But he was basically saying, how long do we have to suffer? How long do we have to go through this? And I feel like as a Black community, that's something that we say to God often. And God's message to him was that, like, don't worry about the suffering. Like, this nation will be punished for the suffering that they've given you. Just know that your life will be spared. Wow. And so I feel like that verse has come to mind several times, that, like, this nation will be judged for what we have yet to repent of and deal with and address. And so it's just interesting to see how God is placing certain people in certain positions. And so there's a little bit of, like, sadness that our nation will be judged, but excitement because I feel like God is very mindful of the people who are suffering, and He's going to take care of them too. So when you think about people of color in these high positions they're being put into, I'm just like, kind of reminds me of the Joseph story, and how, like, Joseph was at the very bottom and he was elevated to a position where he had a lot of say in being able to protect his family, but, like, he took care of a whole nation. And so I see that happening with people of color. So 2020 and 2021 has been discouraging, but at the same time, there's something happening beyond what we can see that God is doing. And so the church, I think, is too late, but I feel like I've had a Jonah spirit where I'm just like, okay, burn it down and let's move on. And
that's awesome.
And God has been very patient, and that I feel like He keeps saying, yeah, but think about Nineveh. Like, they repented eventually, and I did save that nation. And so I do think that God always is giving us chances, and there's still opportunity for that. But I don't know if we're too late. Like, I don't know if that will happen for us, just because we still haven't done it. We still haven't addressed the issues. We haven't addressed the root of the problem.
Dang, I'm like feeling Lydia, just as you're sharing. I'm just Hannah, yes.
No, I'm just saying snaps.
Oh, snaps. Yeah, I actually just feel the Holy Spirit so much as you're talking, and I think I shared this with you last time we talked. I've had this word from the Lord for years. It comes from a David Byrne song, and it's "burning down the house" is the term that he's used. And I for a long time I wasn't sure what he was referring to. I mean, over and over again. And the last time I had you on, and today, that keeps coming back to me, and I'm like feeling it in my body right now. And I've just had this sense through this whole pandemic. There's just been this massive purification process happening to the bride of Christ and to His church. And I think this is an enormous piece of that. Is, this, like, the church in America is this sort of, it is like a judgment on us. You know what I mean? It's like, God hears the voices of people who are oppressed and persecuted. They rise up to His ears, and it feels like God is on the move, and in this way. And I hear what you're saying. It just feels like too little, too late. But I'm wondering, as you're talking, it feels like the church in America, has failed so miserably, and yet God's church, the church of Jesus, the gates of hell will not overcome. And so there's this sense of God, God's church will prevail. And so I guess as we kind of think about moving forward, is there anything that sort of gives you hope? Is there anything where you see, in the midst of everything that's wrong, that you see God's hand, that you see where God is moving, and that gives you just a sense of a different tomorrow.
I know I see him still blessing every day. There's relationships that I have specifically from a multicultural standpoint, people who get it, who understand it, who have been vocal, who have been standing alongside me, who reach out just to see how I'm doing. Like, hey, I saw this happen. I remember, take the day of George Floyd, when that happened and that video hit, I had, three of my Wright brothers, man, they just hit me. Like, I just saw the news and I'm just checking on you.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't have a answer. They didn't have anything else for me, but just, I love you. I'm here if you need me. And in those moments, that's all you can ask for, is to have somebody just say, not trying to talk me into, what you saw wasn't what you saw and, making excuses or anything else, but just saying, I'm here and I'm willing to listen to whatever you want to say. This is a safe place. And I know so many people like that, meeting people who care about you regardless, who are inquisitive, who are asking questions. So many people who are saying, I didn't know, but now that I do, I'm doing things differently. So I've got tremendous hope. I think anytime if you got Christ in your life, you can't help but hope. He is the great hope. Why else would we do this? Why else would I live for him? It's the opportunity to speak on his behalf. It's the opportunity to see him work in people's lives and to help people love each other the way that he loves us. So, I'm extremely hopeful. At the end of the day, regardless of who's in office, man, Jesus is still on the throne. And that keeps me going every single day because I know he's got a handle on whatever. And to Lydia's point, it hasn't mattered. It doesn't matter what happens. If you're in the palm of Jesus' hands, man, I'm telling you, he will protect you. He will keep you. He will watch over you. He will bless you in the middle of a pandemic. He'll open doors that other people can't open. He'll place the right people around you at the right time. So yes, I'm incredibly hopeful for the future.
Yeah, I think for me, like along the lines of what Lydia was saying, and in answer to your question, kind of how we can see God at work and what's going on, I do think that, like, though this year, the start of this year has been traumatic and really upsetting, it is evidence that God is doing something, like he's sifting the sand or running his fingers through our foundation, and things are being stirred up, and it's very painful, but I do see signs of him working, of revealing, like in what the quote you quoted of how God raises up leaders who reflect like what's wrong in the country, like that's showing that he's gonna do something about that. And I had a friend who reached out on Wednesday when all this was happening and encouraged me and a couple of my friends from college, and she sent us this verse from Psalm 146, just reminding us, do not put your trust in princes and mortal men. The Lord is the one who upholds the cause of the oppressed, and he's the one who gives food to the hungry and sets prisoners free. And that just was really encouraging to me that we were never meant to have hope in our country, though good things can happen through politics and government. That's not where our hope is supposed to be set, or our security is found. It's in the true King, and that's really where I find encouragement and the ability to carry on.
Thank you, Hannah. That's kind of a good a good word to end on. Yeah. Before I kind of close this out, did anybody else want to add anything to anything that we've talked about so far?
I would just emphasize, like, God always takes a remnant, right? Like, if he does something, he always takes a group of people who have followed them, and he protects them and saves them for the next generation. And so I guess my hope is that, like, there will be a remnant from this, and they will carry on. And so my prayer is always, God, like, search my heart, know my thoughts, see my ways. And like, if there's anything that's offensive and not of you, let me know so that I can change it. And so I guess just continually being mindful of like, where do I fit into all of this? Am I a part of the problem, or am I being a part of the solution? And just continually trusting God for direction as we navigate these like uncharted waters. So yeah.
Good. I was actually earlier when I was sharing, I was thinking that same word, the remnant, and have heard some really good teachings just along the lines of what you're saying, Lydia, of pulling up that remnant. And that is actually my hope as well, of just true disciples of Jesus that are willing to go the places that Jesus went and live the life he calls us to lead. And that's actually what gives me hope as well. And I guess I just want to first thank you, all three of you, so much for being willing to bare your souls openly for everyone who's going to participate in this. I feel like it's beyond valuable. Your stories, your lives, what you're sharing with us, what you're willing to share. We gain so much from it. And so thank you so much for being a part of this. And trying to find my notes here. As I've been processing this, I've been thinking about the verse from Micah 6:8, which says, "He has shown you, O mortal, what is good, and what does the Lord require of you? To act justly and to love mercy and to walk humbly with your God." And so I've been thinking about what it means to do justice and walk humbly. And I guess kind of my last thing here, I think I'm speaking more so to kind of to my white brothers and sisters about, as we to carry those things in tension, because I think that at times when you step into doing justice, you can take on a form of self-righteousness. Like, I'm one of the enlightened ones, I'm on the good side of things. And I saw a term being used on social media called virtual signaling. Have you heard of virtual signaling, anybody? I had not heard of it, and it kind of shot out at me, so I actually looked up the definition. It is the action or practice of publicly expressing opinions or sentiments intended to demonstrate one's good character or the moral correctness of one's position on a particular issue. And I think there's a temptation to do that, so you can feel like you're on the right side of things. And so I think it's really important as a follower of Jesus to call out what is wrong and what is evil. And so I think it's important that we have to call out the idolatry and allure of Christian nationalism and its intermingling with white supremacy. We have to just continue to call that out openly and talk about it. But I saw this quote that really spoke to me personally from somebody on Facebook, and I said, it says, "I think it is dangerous for American Christians of all stripes," and then he put, with some exceptions, "to denounce Christian nationalism as those people over there without deeper self-reflection." Then he went on to talk about Nancy Pelosi's invoking of the prayer of St. Francis at the joint session of Congress when it restarted late last night, is another side of the same coin of invoking God to baptize and bless any nationalist aspirations. To denounce yesterday's acts as blatant displays of Christian nationalism without examining our own traditions, historic investments in Christian nationalism is akin to saying that the real racists are those who wear white hoods and burn crosses. Racism and white supremacy certainly run deeper than that, as does Christian nationalism. Those of us who identify as Christians are likely more invested in the nation than we'd care to admit. And so for me, that is the mix of humility and doing justice, to carry those things in tension, that I am called to put myself on the line, to risk offending people, to risk damaging relationships, to be on the right side of truth, of biblical truth and justice, and to speak boldly about it, but to recognize my own entanglement with white supremacy and Christian nationalism. And that's the deep inner work I have to continue to do. And so I kind of, because I know a lot of white people are watching this today, I just kind of wanted to leave with that exhortation that I don't want to be part of the church that's too late and not willing to continue to do justice, and at any cost, biblical justice. But part of that as a white person is for you to do your own internal work about your own attachment to your whiteness and to white supremacy and to your own intermingling of Christianity and nationalism. And that's just the important ongoing work that we as white followers of Jesus need to do. And so I wanted to just give that kind of final exhortation to my white brothers and sisters as we move forward as the Church of Jesus Christ. So I'm going to kind of officially close this out. But once again, we are just incredibly honored and privileged to have had this time together today. And I know it was incredibly fruitful for me. I felt the Holy Spirit's presence as we were talking. I just encourage you to be praying for healing, and just seeking the move of the Spirit in the midst of everything that's going on, and to lean in and join God in what He's doing. Look around at the signs of the time, see what God is doing, and be a part of what God's doing. Go in peace, Vineyard, Milwaukee.